Okay, let's dive in. We're looking at some pretty intense recent events, Israel and Iran.
Right. And specifically, how the U.S. role is being seen, debated.
Yeah, and debated in some, well, maybe unexpected ways, even within certain political groups.
Exactly. We've got a bunch of source material here, articles, some newsletters, even social media posts, and they lay out this specific viewpoint.
A quite pointed one, it seems, from a prominent conservative voice focusing on former President Trump's connection to it all.
hmm So our goal here, really, is to just unpack the arguments, the facts, as presented in these sources.
Right. We want to understand this particular viewpoint, what the sources say its implications are, sticking just to what's in the material you found.
Okay, so first off, the sources jump right into the central accusation that the U.S., despite saying otherwise, was, well, complicit in Israel's actions.
Complicit, that's a heavy word used in the sources.
It is, and this perspective is coming strongly from figures like Tucker Carlson in the material we reviewed. One newsletter bit actually says, and I'm pulling this from the source, despite being complicit in the act of war, the president hopes last night's events will help his ongoing nuclear negotiations with Iran.
Okay, so complicit. How do the sources flesh that out? Why that claim? What's the reasoning offered in the material?
Well, the reasoning presented connects it back to, long-term U.S. policy.
Uh,
Carlson, for example, argues that even if the U.S. military wasn't, directly pushing buttons, years of funding Israel, providing weapons, fundamentally ties the U.S. to what happened. The material points out that Donald Trump himself apparently just bragged about this aid on Truth Social.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the argument in these sources isn't just about operational stuff, boots on the ground or whatever, but the actual providing of the tools.
Precisely. Yeah. That's the core of it in the material. Trump reportedly boasted, again on Truth Social, that Israel was using U.S. equipment, described it as the best and most lethal military equipment anywhere in the world by the FAR.
Wow.
So the sources taking this view argue that giving those arms, talking about it publicly, even highlighting it, that inherently puts the U.S. at the center of it all. Again, that's according to Carlson's reported view in these sources.
And the sources say it might go beyond just the weapons. There's mention of Carlson claiming Washington moved beforehand.
That's right. The material we looked at quotes Carlson directly. Washington knew these attacks would happen. They aided Israel in carrying them out.
Okay.
And so this perspective concludes, and this is a key line from the sources, politicians purporting to be America first can't now credibly turn around and say they had nothing to do with it.
So the idea presented is that the aid, plus maybe knowing it was coming, makes it hard to claim detachment.
That's the argument presented in these sources, yeah. The scale of the aid, the public talk about it, the alleged foreknowledge, it all ties Washington in from this specific viewpoint.
But wait, the sources also bring up something else, right? About Trump's reported specific actions just before the strikes? How does that fit in, according to the material?
Yeah, that adds another layer. The Wall Street Journal is cited in the material. It reported that in one instance, Trump had actually advised Netanyahu against doing these specific attacks.
He advised against it. But the viewpoint cited is still complicity because of the aid and knowledge.
Yeah.
How do the sources handle that tension?
Well, they don't exactly, smooth it over in one neat paragraph. They sort of lay out these different pieces side by side.
Okay.
The material notes Trump's advice to Netanyahu reportedly went unheeded. And then Reuters is quoted, reporting Trump himself, saying he knew about the raid beforehand, but insisted the U.S. played no part. He's quoted saying, "We knew everything, and I tried to save Iran humiliation and death. I tried to save them very hard because I would have loved to have seen a deal worked out." So, yeah, the sources present this mix, reported advice against the attack, reported knowledge of it, and then this overlying argument about complicity based on the foundational aid and Trump's own comments about it.
That definitely creates a complex picture in the narrative these sources build. Okay, shifting just a bit. What do the sources say is the impact of all this, particularly within, say, conservative circles?
Yeah, this is apparently, according to the material, causing some real division. Sources like podcaster Jack Posobiec, conservative activist Charlie Kirk, they're quoted talking about how this conflict is supposedly splitting MAGA down the middle.
Splitting the base. Why? What reason do the sources give for this specific issue causing a rift like that?
The sources seem to tie it back to, core voter motivations. Posobiec is cited, arguing that a direct strike on Iran that would disastrously split the Trump coalition.
Okay, why disastrously?
Because, in his view, presented in the sources, key swing states voted for Trump specifically because he ran against starting new wars. That was a big promise.
I see. And are there other voices in the material echoing that kind of concern?
Yeah, Mollie Hemingway from The Federalist, she's quoted in one post. She apparently said that if Trump did give Israel a green light for targeting Iran, millions of American voters would see that as an unforgivable betrayal.
Wow. Betrayal.
So the sources together, they really highlight that foreign policy, especially getting involved in conflicts, is reportedly a huge and maybe very divisive issue inside the conservative movement right now, potentially really impacting political support.
Okay, so let's just quickly recap the main tension presented across these sources. You have the strong accusation of U.S. complicity rooted in the weapons aid and alleged foreknowledge.
Despite reports of Trump advising against the specific action.
Right, while also reportedly knowing about it. And all of this is apparently causing significant splits or divisions within conservative political groups.
Exactly. And this whole dynamic, described in the sources, it raises a question, really, for you, the listener, to think about.
Okay.
How do these kinds of public criticisms, these reported internal arguments, coming from within what you expect to be a unified political base, how do they potentially challenge the main stories we hear and maybe even reshape political alliances? That's the question raised by the material we looked at.
It's certainly a complex situation painted by these sources, definitely something to mull over after this deep dive.